An emotional story of resilience moving. A street girl with a sweet and sincere voice asked, "Can I play with her?" The morning fog rolled in from the Pacific Ocean, thick and grey, wrapping itself around the clifftop estate like a shroud. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, Michael Thornton stood motionless, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. 5 years had passed since that terrible night, and yet every sunrise felt like the first morning without her, raw and impossibly empty. The mansion was silent. It had always been silent, even when it was full of people. But this silence was different. This silence had weight. It pressed down on everything, suffocating the laughter that once echoed through these halls, smothering the warmth that his wife Catherine had brought to every corner of this home. Now it was just a building. Beautiful, yes. Expensive, certainly, but lifeless. Michael turned away from the window, his reflection catching in the glass. He barely recognized himself anymore. At 42, he should have been in the prime of his life. His technology company had just been valued at over $3 billion. He had homes in San Francisco, New York, and here in Carmel by the sea. He had cars, art, investments, all the markers of success that once meant something to him, but none of it mattered. None of it filled the emptiness that Catherine left behind. And there was Emma, his daughter, his beautiful, bright 7-year-old daughter who hadn't spoken a single word in 5 years. Not since that night. Not since she saw what happened. Not since her world shattered into pieces too small to put back together. Michael walked down the hallway, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Emma's bedroom door was slightly open, and he could see her sitting by the window exactly where she always sat. Her blonde hair, so much like Catherine's, caught the pale morning light. She was staring outside, her small hands folded in her lap, her face expressionless. The doctors called it selective mutism, though Michael hated that term. It made it sound like Emma was choosing not to speak, as if she had control over the trauma that had locked her voice away. He had taken her to every specialist on the West Coast. Neurologists, psychologists, speech therapists, trauma specialists. They all said the same thing in different words. The loss of her mother had created a psychological block so profound that Emma's mind had simply shut down that part of itself. She could physically speak. There was nothing wrong with her vocal cords or her brain function. But emotionally she was trapped in a moment she couldn't escape from. Michael knocked softly on the doorframe. Emma turned her head slightly, acknowledging his presence but not meeting his eyes. She never met anyone's eyes anymore. "Morning, sweetheart," he said gently. "It's Saturday. Want to go to the park?" Emma nodded just once. That was always her answer on Saturdays. It was their ritual, the only thing that seemed to bring any flicker of response from her. Every Saturday morning, they would drive to Point Lobos State Park, walk the trails together in silence, and watch the sea lions from the viewing platform. Emma never smiled, never showed excitement, but Michael had learned to read the subtle shifts in her expression. At the park, something in her seemed to settle, as if the ocean reminded her of a time when things were different. They drove in silence, as always. Emma sat in the back seat, looking out the window, her teddy bear clutched against her chest. It was the same bear Catherine had given her for her 2nd birthday, worn now and faded, but Emma refused to be without it. Michael glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his heart aching. She was so small, so fragile, and he felt so utterly helpless. The park was relatively empty when they arrived, just a few early morning hikers and an elderly couple walking their dog. Michael parked near their usual trail, and Emma climbed out of the car without waiting for him. She knew the way by heart. They walked side by side, the sound of the ocean growing louder as they approached the cliffs. The fog was beginning to lift, and patches of blue sky appeared between the clouds. It was going to be a beautiful day, Michael thought absently. Not that it mattered. Beautiful days, ugly days, they all felt the same now. They reached the clearing where Emma always stopped, a small grassy area surrounded by cypress trees. From here you could see the entire coastline, the waves rolling endlessly toward the shore. Emma walked to her favorite spot under the largest tree and sat down in the grass, still clutching her bear. Michael stood a few feet away, giving her space but staying close enough to watch over her. This was their routine. She would sit, he would stand, and they would exist together in this quiet bubble, separated from the world by grief, But then something unexpected happened. A voice, bright and clear, cut through the morning air. "Can I play with her?" Michael turned sharply. A young girl stood at the edge of the clearing, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with dark tangled hair and dirt smudged across her cheeks. Her clothes were too big for her, a faded purple sweatshirt and jeans with holes in the knees. Her feet were bare, and she carried a small backpack that looked like it had seen better days. Behind her, at a distance, stood a woman. She was perhaps in her mid-30s, wearing simple clothes, a denim jacket over a grey t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her face was weathered but kind, and she watched the girl with protective alertness. Michael hesitated. The contrast between this child and Emma was stark. Emma in her pristine white dress and pink cardigan, her hair brushed and neat. This girl, wild and unkempt, looking like she hadn't had a proper meal in days. But before Michael could respond, something extraordinary happened. Emma looked up. Actually looked up, her eyes focusing on the strange girl with an intensity Michael hadn't seen in years. And then, slowly, deliberately, Emma nodded. The girl's face broke into a huge smile. She ran forward, dropping to her knees in the grass beside Emma. "I'm Lily," she said, her voice full of warmth. "What's your name?" Emma didn't answer, of course, but she didn't look away either. Lily didn't seem bothered by the silence. She pulled something from her backpack, a small worn rubber ball, and held it out. "Wanna play catch?" And then the miracle happened. Emma smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. Michael felt his chest tighten, emotion flooding through him so suddenly he had to steady himself against a tree. He hadn't seen Emma smile in 5 years. 5 years of doctors and therapy, and desperate attempts to reach her. And this stranger, this barefoot girl with the tangled hair, had done it in seconds. Lily tossed the ball gently to Emma. Emma caught it awkwardly, her hands uncertain, and then threw it back. It was a weak throw, but Lily caught it easily and laughed, a sound so pure and joyful that it seemed to fill the entire clearing. They played like that for several minutes, tossing the ball back and forth, and with each throw, Emma's movements became more confident. She was engaged, present in a way Michael hadn't seen since Catherine died. And then Lily jumped to her feet. "Let's run!" she called out, already taking off toward the edge of the clearing. Emma stood up. She dropped her teddy bear in the grass. And then she opened her mouth. "Race you." The words were quiet, barely above a whisper, but they were words. Real words. Spoken out loud, Michael's legs nearly gave out. He grabbed the tree trunk harder, his vision blurring with tears. Emma was running now, chasing after Lily, and the sound of her laughter, her actual laughter, carried back to him on the ocean breeze. He didn't know how long he stood there watching them play. Time seemed to lose meaning. All he knew was that something impossible had just happened. His daughter, his silent, broken daughter, was playing and laughing and speaking. Eventually the girls collapsed in the grass, both breathing hard, their faces flushed. Emma was smiling, really smiling, and Lily was talking animatedly about something, her hands gesturing wildly. Michael finally found the strength to move. He walked toward them, his heart pounding. The woman who had been standing at a distance was moving closer too, her expression cautious but curious. As Michael approached, Lily looked up at him. "Your daughter is really nice," she said simply. "She's my friend now." Michael couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. He just nodded. The woman reached them, and up close Michael could see the weariness in her eyes, the way her shoulders carried invisible weight. But there was dignity there too, a quiet strength. "I'm sorry if we intruded," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Lily saw your daughter sitting alone and asked if she could play. I should have checked with you first." "No," Michael managed, his voice rough. "No, it's okay. It's more than okay." The woman's eyes searched his face, and he saw understanding dawn there. She knew, somehow she knew what this moment meant. "I'm Sarah," she said. "Sarah Bennett." "Michael Thornton." He extended his hand, and she shook it briefly. "We come here most mornings," Sarah continued. "It's peaceful. And Lily loves the ocean." Michael looked at the two girls, now making flower crowns from the wild grass. "Emma hasn't spoken in 5 years," he said quietly. "Not since her mother passed away. But just now with your daughter she spoke. She actually spoke." Sarah's expression softened. "Lily's not my daughter," she said, "but she is my responsibility. I found her when she was just a baby. abandoned at a church in Salinas. No one ever claimed her, so I've been raising her ever since. There was a story there Michael could tell. A complicated one. But right now all that mattered was the sound of Emma's voice, still echoing in his mind. "Thank you," he said, and the words felt inadequate for what he was feeling. "I don't know what happened, but thank you." Sarah smiled, a sad but genuine smile. Sometimes kids just understand each other in ways we can't. They stood together, watching the girls play, and for the first time in 5 years, Michael felt something other than emptiness. He felt hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there, glowing faintly in his chest like the first light of dawn. When it was time to leave, Emma actually protested. She tugged on Michael's sleeve and pointed at Lily, her eyes pleading. "Can they come to our house?" Emma whispered, and Michael nearly broke down again at the sound of her voice. He looked at Sarah, who seemed uncertain. "We couldn't," she began. "Please," Michael said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I know this is strange. I know we just met, but something happened here today, something important, and I'd be grateful if you'd let me thank you properly. Come to the house, stay for lunch. Let the girls spend more time together." Sarah hesitated, her eyes moving between Lily and Emma. Finally, she nodded. "Just for lunch." "Just for lunch," Michael agreed, though something in his gut told him this was the beginning of something much bigger than a simple meal. They walked back to the parking lot together, the girls running ahead, holding hands now like they had known each other forever. Michael gave Sarah his address, and she looked momentarily shocked when she realized which estate he was talking about, but she didn't comment on it. As they drove home, Emma talking quietly in the back seat about the game she had played with Lily, Michael felt the weight on his chest lighten just a fraction. The road ahead was still uncertain, still filled with pain and unanswered questions. But for the first time since Catherine died, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward through the darkness. The mansion came into view as they rounded the coastal highway, its white walls gleaming against the blue sky. Michael pulled through the gates and Emma was out of the car before he even turned off the engine, running to the door to wait for Lily and Sarah to arrive. Inside, the house felt different somehow, less like a tomb. Michael moved through the rooms, suddenly seeing them through a stranger's eyes. The expensive art on the walls, the imported furniture, the grand staircase. It all seemed excessive now, almost embarrassing. When Sarah's old Honda pulled up the driveway 20 minutes later, Michael opened the door before they could knock. Lily burst in, her eyes wide as she took in the entryway, the chandelier, the marble floors. But Emma grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the stairs, already chattering about her room, her toys, her things she wanted to share. Sarah stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "This is quite a place," she said quietly. "It's just a house," Michael replied, and he realized he meant it. "Please come in. Make yourself comfortable." What followed was the strangest and most wonderful afternoon Michael had experienced in years. The girls played upstairs while he and Sarah sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and talking. She told him about her life, about working odd jobs to support herself and Lily, about the struggles and small joys of raising a child alone. He told her about Catherine, about the accident that took her, about the endless nightmare that followed. He didn't mention what Catherine had been doing the night she died, didn't speak about the secrets that had come out afterward. Some wounds were still too fresh to expose, even to a sympathetic stranger. When evening came and it was time for Sarah and Lily to leave, Emma cried. Actual tears streaming down her face as she clung to Lily, begging her not to go. "Can they come back tomorrow?" Emma asked, her voice small but clear. Michael looked at Sarah. She looked tired, uncertain, but when she saw Emma's desperate expression, she softened. "We can come back tomorrow," she said gently, and they did. And the day after that, and the day after that. What started as a simple act of kindness evolved into something Michael hadn't planned for, hadn't even considered possible. Sarah and Lily became part of their lives, woven into their daily routine so seamlessly it felt like they had always been there. Emma blossomed. She spoke more each day, her vocabulary expanding, her confidence growing. She laughed. She ran through the halls. She was becoming herself again, the child Michael remembered from before the tragedy. But beneath the surface, complications were growing. Michael could see the strain in Sarah's face when she thought no one was watching. She was struggling, working herself to exhaustion to maintain her independence while spending so much time at the mansion. And Michael, driven by gratitude and something deeper he was afraid to name, wanted to help, wanted to do more. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Michael found Sarah standing on the terrace looking out at the ocean. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water. "Stay," he said quietly. Sarah turned, startled. "What? Stay here, move in." "You and Lily. There's more than enough room and Emma needs Lily, you can see that." "Michael, I can't just move into your home. We barely know each other." "Then get to know me," he said, and the words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge yet. Sarah looked away. "It's complicated. Everything's complicated," Michael replied. "But Emma is speaking again because of Lily, because of you. That's not complicated. That's a gift." She was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "1 month," she said. "We'll stay for 1 month and then we'll see." Michael agreed, though he already knew a month wouldn't be enough. Something had shifted in his world, a crack letting light into the darkness, and he wasn't ready to let that light go. That night, as he lay in bed listening to the sound of the ocean, Michael thought about Catherine, about the woman he had loved and lost, about the secrets she had kept, and the pain they had caused. And for the first time, he allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was possible to move forward without forgetting, to heal without betraying the past. Upstairs in the guest room that was becoming Lily's, Sarah lay awake too, staring at the ceiling. She was thinking about the past as well, about choices made and roads not taken, about a night 5 years ago when she had lost her job at this very estate, dismissed without explanation or warning by a woman who seemed desperate to hide something. Sarah had never forgotten that night. And now, by some twist of fate, she was back in this house, surrounded by its luxury and its secrets. She thought about the little girl sleeping down the hall, the baby she had found abandoned all those years ago, the baby with the hospital bracelet still attached to her tiny wrist, a bracelet from Pacific Coast Medical Center, the same hospital where Catherine Thornton had given birth. Sarah closed her eyes, pushing the thoughts away. It was probably nothing, a coincidence, but deep down in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she knew the truth was more complicated than that. And sooner or later, complicated truths always found their way into the light. The weeks that followed transformed the Thornton estate in ways Michael never could have imagined. The silence that had suffocated every corner of the mansion began to dissolve, replaced by the sounds of life. Lily's laughter echoing down the hallways, Emma's voice still quiet but growing stronger each day, calling out to her new friend. Even Sarah's presence seemed to breathe warmth into the cold spaces, her gentle humming as she moved through the kitchen, her soft footsteps on the stairs. Michael found himself looking forward to mornings again. He would wake to the sound of the girls playing in Emma's room, their voices drifting through the walls. He would come downstairs to find Sarah making breakfast, her movements efficient and comfortable, as if she had always belonged there. They would sit together at the kitchen table, drinking coffee while the girls ate pancakes and talk about simple things. The weather, plans for the day, nothing heavy, nothing complicated, just the easy conversation of people learning to be comfortable with each other. But beneath the surface, Michael sensed something unspoken. Sarah would sometimes grow distant, her eyes clouding over as she stared out the window. She would catch herself, smile apologetically, and return to the moment. But Michael noticed. He always noticed. One afternoon, while the girls were in the pool with Emma's swimming instructor, Michael found Sarah in the library. She was standing in front of the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Michael said quietly from the doorway. Sarah froze. For a moment she didn't turn around. When she finally did, her expression was guarded. "What makes you say that?" "The way you move through the house. You don't get lost. You know where things are." He stepped into the room. "And yesterday, when you were looking for the sugar, you went straight to the cabinet where we keep it. Nobody told you where it was." Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly. She walked to one of the leather chairs and sat down, gesturing for Michael to sit across from her. "I worked here," she said finally. 5 years ago. I was Catherine's personal assistant for..." About 6 months. The name hung in the air between them. Catherine. Michael felt his chest tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't think it mattered. It was a long time ago, and I was only here briefly. Sarah looked down at her hands. I was fired, actually. Quite suddenly, Catherine gave me 2 weeks severance and asked me not to come back. No explanation. I never understood why. Michael's mind was racing. 5 years ago, 6 months before Catherine died. What had happened during that time? He realized with a sinking feeling that there were vast stretches of his late wife's life he knew nothing about. Secrets she had kept, lies she had told. What was she like? He asked, surprising himself. When you worked for her, what was she like? Sarah considered the question carefully. She was complicated, she said finally. Beautiful, charming, but also sad. There was always something sad about her, even when she smiled. She was restless, I think, always looking for something she couldn't find. Did she ever mention anyone? Michael pressed. A friend, maybe? Someone she spent time with? Sarah's expression shifted, became more cautious. Michael, I don't think this is a conversation we should be having. Please, I need to know. She was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. There was a man. He came to the house sometimes when you were traveling for business. Bradley Carson. He said he was an old friend from college. Michael felt like he'd been punched. Bradley, his best friend since their undergraduate days at Stanford. The man who had been his right hand in building the company. The one who had stood beside him at his wedding. Who had been there in the hospital the night Emma was born. They were close? Michael asked, his voice hollow. I don't know the details, Sarah said quickly. I only saw him a few times, but Catherine seemed different when he was around. More animated, almost guilty. The pieces were clicking into place now, fragments of truth Michael had been avoiding for years. After Catherine's death, Bradley had disappeared from his life, stopped answering calls, moved to New York without explanation. At the time, Michael had assumed it was grief, that Bradley couldn't handle being around the reminders of Catherine. Now he understood it was something else entirely. Betrayal. There's something else, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something I've been trying to understand since I moved in here. Michael looked at her, saw the conflict in her eyes. When I found Lily, she was wrapped in a hospital blanket. She had a bracelet on her wrist with a patient number and the hospital name. Pacific Coast Medical Center. I kept it, thinking maybe someday it would help me figure out who she was, where she came from. Michael's blood ran cold. That's where Catherine gave birth. Sarah nodded. I know. I looked it up when I first started working here. And Michael, the dates match. Lily was found abandoned approximately 6 weeks after Catherine gave birth. The room seemed to tilt. Michael gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles white. What are you saying? I'm saying there's a possibility that Lily is Catherine's biological daughter. That the story about the baby being kidnapped from the hospital might have been a lie. That maybe Catherine gave her away. That's impossible, Michael said, but even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't. Nothing was impossible. Not after everything else. Catherine told everyone she had a miscarriage after Emma, Sarah continued, her words tumbling out now. But then, 2 years later, she announced she was pregnant again. Do you remember if there were any medical records? Ultrasounds? Doctor visits? Michael tried to think back, but it was all a blur. He had been so focused on the company back then, traveling constantly, closing deals, building the empire. Catherine had handled all the pregnancy details herself. He had trusted her completely. She was showing, he said weakly. She was definitely pregnant. Or wearing convincing padding, Sarah said gently. Michael, I'm not trying to hurt you, but I think we need to know the truth. For Lily's sake, for Emma's sake, for all of us. Michael stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, he could see the girls playing in the pool, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Emma looked so happy, so alive, and Lily, with her dark hair and bright eyes, splashing and diving without a care in the world. Could she really be Catherine's daughter? The child of his wife's affair with his best friend? The thought made him sick, but beneath the nausea was something else. A strange, complicated tenderness, because regardless of her origins, Lily had given him back his daughter. She had brought light back into this house, and he couldn't hate her for the sins of her parents. We need to find out for sure, Michael said finally. We need a DNA test. Sarah nodded. I agree. But Michael, if it's true, if Lily is Catherine and Bradley's daughter, what does that mean? What do we do? We protect her, Michael said without hesitation. Whatever the truth is, we protect her. She's an innocent child who's been through enough. She deserves better than this. That evening, Michael made a call to his attorney, explaining the situation in careful, measured terms. Within 2 days, arrangements had been made for discreet DNA testing. A nurse came to the house, collected samples from Michael, Emma, and with Sarah's permission, Lily. The results would take a week. Those 7 days were the longest of Michael's life. He moved through the hours in a daze, watching the girls play, eating meals with Sarah, going through the motions of normalcy while his mind churned with possibilities. Sarah seemed to sense his turmoil. She gave him space but remained present, a steady grounding force. They would sit together in the evenings after the girls went to bed, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. Michael found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. She was nothing like Catherine. Where Catherine had been glamorous and mercurial, Sarah was grounded and real. She didn't wear designer clothes or perfect makeup. She didn't play games or hide behind masks. She was simply herself, honest and direct. And Michael realized he'd been craving that kind of authenticity for longer than he could remember. When the results finally came, Michael asked Sarah to be with him when he opened the envelope. They sat in his study, the sealed manila folder on the desk between them. "Whatever this says," Sarah said quietly, "we deal with it together. Okay?" Michael nodded, grateful for her presence. He opened the envelope with shaking hands and pulled out the documents. The words blurred together at first, medical terminology and percentages. But then the conclusion came into focus, clear and undeniable. Lily shared DNA with Emma. They were half-sisters. Lily was not Michael's biological daughter, but she was definitely Catherine's, and by process of elimination, her father could only be Bradley. Michael set the papers down carefully, afraid that if he held them too tightly, they might shatter like glass. "She was mine," he said hoarsely. "Catherine was my wife. Emma was ours. And all that time she was carrying another man's child. My best friend's child." Sarah reached across the desk and took his hand. "I'm so sorry. She lied to everyone. She faked a pregnancy, faked a birth, and then what? What did she do? Did she plan to abandon the baby from the beginning?" "Janice, we may never know," Sarah said gently. "Catherine's gone. We can't ask her. But Bradley's not gone," Michael's voice hardened. "Bradley's very much alive, and he's going to answer for this." Over the next few days, Michael hired a private investigator to track down Bradley Carson. It didn't take long. Bradley was living in Manhattan, working for a rival tech firm, maintaining a low profile. When Michael called him, Bradley's shock was palpable. "Michael," he said, his voice strained, "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I know about Lily," Michael said coldly. "I know everything." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long, Michael thought the connection had dropped. Finally, Bradley spoke. "I never wanted to hurt you." "You have to believe that." "I don't have to believe anything. What I want is answers. And then I want you to stay away from her. Stay away from all of us." "Michael, she's my daughter. You gave up the right to call her that when you abandoned her at a church. You gave up everything when you betrayed me with my wife." "It wasn't like that," Bradley protested. "Catherine and we didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. And when she got pregnant, we panicked. She couldn't tell you. You would have left her. So we made a plan. She would fake a pregnancy with you, and when the time came, we'd figure something out. But after Lily was born, Catherine couldn't handle it. The guilt, the fear of being caught. She wanted to give her up for adoption, but I refused. We fought about it for weeks. And then one night she just did it. She left Lily at that church and told me it was done. There was nothing I could do. "You could have gone to the police," Michael said. "You could have told the truth." "And destroyed you?" "Destroyed Emma? Catherine begged me not to. She said it would ruin everything. So I stayed quiet, and I've hated myself for it every single day since." Michael closed his eyes, fighting back the rage that threatened to consume him. "Listen to me very carefully, Bradley. Lily is safe now. She's loved. She has a home. And you're going to let her keep that. You're going to sign away your parental rights. You're going to let me adopt her legally. And you're never going to contact her ever. You can't ask me to do that. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Your company, your colleagues, your family. Everyone will know you're the kind of man who abandons his own child. There was a long pause. When Bradley spoke again, his voice was broken. You really love her? This child that's not yours? She's more mine than she ever was yours, Michael said. She saved my daughter. She saved me. So yes, I love her, and I'll protect her from anyone who tries to hurt her. Including you. Okay, Bradley whispered. Okay, I'll sign whatever papers you need. Just promise me she's happy. Promise me she'll have a good life. She will, Michael said. I'll make sure of it. When he hung up, Michael felt drained, hollowed out. Sarah was waiting in the doorway, and without a word, he went to her. She wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time since Catherine's death, Michael let himself break. He sobbed against her shoulder, years of pain and betrayal and grief pouring out of him. Sarah held him through it all, her hand stroking his hair, her voice murmuring soothing words. And when the storm finally passed, Michael realized something profound. He wasn't alone anymore. He had Emma, bright and speaking and alive again. He had Lily, chaotic and joyful and innocent. And he had Sarah, steady and strong and real. They were becoming a family. Not the family he had planned, not the family he had lost, but a family nonetheless. Built from broken pieces, but whole in the ways that mattered. That night, as Michael tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with her mother's blue eyes. Daddy, can Lily stay forever? Would you like that? Michael asked gently. Emma nodded emphatically. She's my sister. I know she is. Michael's throat tightened. How do you know that? I just do, Emma said simply. I feel it. She's supposed to be here with us. And so is Sarah. They're supposed to be our family. Michael kissed her forehead. Then that's what we'll make sure happens. As he left Emma's room, Michael found Sarah sitting on the stairs, clearly having overheard the conversation. Her eyes were wet. She's right, you know, Sarah said. Lily and I are supposed to be here. I feel it too. Michael sat beside her on the stairs, their shoulders touching. Then stay, not for a month, not temporarily. Stay permanently. Both of you. Sarah turned to look at him, and in her eyes Michael saw his own hope reflected back. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Michael said. We've all been broken, all of us. But maybe together we can be whole again. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat there in the quiet hallway, listening to the sound of the ocean and the soft breathing of the children sleeping nearby. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Michael knew. The legal process of adopting Lily, the questions from friends and family, the slow, difficult work of building a new life from the ashes of the old. But for tonight, in this moment, they had peace. And that was enough. Upstairs, in the room that had become hers, Lily lay awake staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars Sarah had stuck to her ceiling. She didn't understand all the complicated adult things happening around her. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time in her life, she had a real home. And she was never letting it go. The legal process of adopting Lily proved more complicated than Michael anticipated. His attorney, Gerald Hayes, a silver-haired man with 30 years of family law experience, laid out the obstacles during their first official meeting. The fact that Lily was abandoned as an infant helps, Gerald explained, spreading documents across his massive oak desk. But there's no official record of her being surrendered through proper channels. Sarah essentially found her and kept her without going through the foster system. That creates complications. Michael leaned forward. What kind of complications? The state might argue that proper procedures weren't followed. They could potentially remove Lily from your care while they investigate, and if any biological family comes forward with a claim, they would have priority. Her biological father has agreed to sign away his rights, Michael said. I have that in writing. Gerald raised an eyebrow. May I ask who the father is? Bradley Carson. He's willing to cooperate fully. Good, that helps. But Michael, I need to be frank with you. There are other concerns. You're a wealthy man pursuing adoption of a child who's been living outside the system. Some people might question your motivations. There will be scrutiny. Home visits, psychological evaluations, background checks. The court will want to ensure this is in Lily's best interest, not just yours. It is in her best interest, Sarah interjected from her seat beside Michael. She's happy here. She's thriving. Emma needs her. They need each other. Gerald looked at Sarah thoughtfully. And what is your role in all this, Miss Bennet? I'm Lily's legal guardian. I've cared for her since she was 6 weeks old. I'm here to support whatever's best for her. Would you consider formalizing your relationship with Mr. Thornton? The court tends to look more favorably on two-parent households in adoption cases. The question hung in the air. Michael and Sarah exchanged a glance, and Michael saw the color rise in her cheeks. We're not at that stage, Sarah said carefully. We're friends, co-parents maybe, but nothing more. Gerald nodded, making a note on his legal pad. Understood. Well, let's move forward with what we have. I'll file the preliminary paperwork, but be prepared for this to take time. 6 months, possibly longer. As they left the attorney's office, Sarah was quiet. Michael could sense her withdrawal, the way she seemed to fold into herself when stressed. Hey, he said gently as they reached the car. Talk to me. I'm scared, Sarah admitted. What if they take her away? What if the court decides I wasn't fit to keep her all these years? What if they put her in foster care while they investigate? They won't, Michael said firmly. I have resources. I have influence. I'll make sure she stays with us. With us, Sarah repeated softly. When did we become an us? Michael looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the answer had been forming for weeks. I think we've been an us since that day in the park. We just didn't know it yet. Sarah's eyes glistened. This is all happening so fast. 3 months ago, Lily and I were living in a one-bedroom apartment in Salinas trying to make rent. Now we're in a mansion, talking about adoption and court cases and building a family. It doesn't feel real. It's real, Michael assured her. And yes, it's fast. But sometimes life moves fast. Sometimes you just have to trust it. They drove home in contemplative silence, but when they pulled through the gates of the estate, they were greeted by chaos. A black Mercedes was parked in the driveway, and standing on the front steps was a woman Michael didn't recognize. She was perhaps 60, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, her dark hair styled perfectly. Behind her stood a younger man in an expensive suit, carrying a briefcase. Michael's security chief, Dennis Walsh, was blocking the door, his expression grim. When he saw Michael's car, relief flashed across his face. Mr. Thornton, Dennis called out, these people are claiming they have legal rights to see the children. Michael's protective instincts flared immediately. Who are you? The woman stepped forward, her face a mask of cold determination. I'm Victoria Carson, Bradley's mother, and I believe you have my granddaughter in your custody. Michael felt Sarah tense beside him. How did you know? Sarsti, Bradley called me last night. Quite distraught, actually. He told me everything. About Catherine, about the baby, about your threats to force him out of his daughter's life. Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. Did you really think I would allow you to steal my grandchild? Nobody's stealing anyone, Michael said, fighting to keep his voice level. Lily has been living with Sarah for 8 years. She has a stable, loving home. Bradley abandoned her. Bradley was young and scared. Catherine manipulated him. But family is family, Mr. Thornton, and blood matters more than your money or your estate. The man with the briefcase stepped forward. I'm Robert Matthews, Mrs. Carson's attorney. We've filed an emergency custody petition with the family court. Mrs. Carson is seeking immediate placement of the minor child, Lily Bennet, into her care as the paternal grandmother. Michael's world tilted. You can't do that. We can and we have, Victoria said coolly. I've already been approved for emergency foster placement. A judge will hear the case next week. Until then, I have every right to meet my granddaughter and assess her living situation. Dennis looked at Michael for guidance. Sir? Michael wanted to refuse, wanted to send these people away and never let them near Lily, but he knew that would only make things worse in court. He needed to appear reasonable, cooperative. Fine, he said tightly. You can meet her, but Sarah stays with her the entire time. They went inside and Michael asked Dennis to bring the girls down from Emma's room. While they waited, Victoria prowled around the living room, examining everything with sharp, calculating eyes. Quite the palace you've built here, she commented. But money doesn't make a parent, Mr. Thornton. Bradley told me you have no biological connection to this child whatsoever. You're essentially a stranger trying to buy a daughter. That's not true, Sarah said, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. Michael has been nothing but kind and loving to Lily. She adores him. And Emma needs her. Ah, yes, Emma, Catherine's daughter, the child of a faithless wife. Tell me, how does it feel raising your dead wife's love child while your own daughter watches? Michael stepped forward, his voice dangerous. You need to leave. Right now. Not until I see my granddaughter. At that moment, Lily and Emma came down the stairs, hand in hand. They stopped when they saw the strangers in the living room, Emma instinctively moving closer to Lily. Victoria's expression softened instantly. Lily? Sweetheart, I'm your grandmother. Your daddy's mother. Lily looked confused, pressing against Sarah's side. I don't have a daddy. Yes, you do, darling. His name is Bradley, and he loves you very much. He's told me all about you. Why hasn't he come to see me then? Lily asked, her child's logic cutting through the pretense. Victoria faltered. Well, that's complicated, but I'm here now, and I'd very much like to get to know you. Would you like to come visit my house? I have a beautiful home in San Francisco with a big yard and a pool. We have a pool here, Lily said flatly. And I don't want to go anywhere. This is my home. Lily, sweetheart, you don't understand. These people aren't your real family. Your real family is me and your father, and all your cousins and aunts and uncles who would love to meet you. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She turned and buried her face against Sarah's leg. Emma, protective and fierce, stepped in front of her new sister. Leave her alone, Emma said, her voice clear and strong. You're scaring her. Victoria looked taken aback by the small girl's defiance. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm trying to save my granddaughter from this ridiculous situation. That's enough, Michael said firmly. You've met her. Now you need to go. We'll see you in court next week. Victoria's face hardened. This isn't over. That child belongs with her blood family, and I will fight with everything I have to bring her home where she belongs. After they left, Lily sobbed in Sarah's arms for nearly an hour. Emma sat beside them, holding Lily's hand, whispering reassurances. Michael stood at the window, watching the taillights of Victoria's Mercedes disappear down the driveway, and felt a cold dread settle in his chest. That evening, after the girls finally fell asleep, Michael and Sarah sat in his study, trying to process what had happened. She has money, Sarah said quietly. She has family connections. What if the judge sides with her? Then we fight harder, Michael said. But even as he spoke, he felt the fear. Victoria Carson was a formidable opponent, and she had the one thing that courts tended to value above all else: biological connection. The next few days were tense. Gerald filed counter-motions, arguing that Lily's best interests were served by remaining in her current home. He compiled evidence of Sarah's years of devoted care, Emma's psychological dependence on Lily's presence, and testimonials from teachers and neighbors about Lily's well-being. But Victoria was building her own case. She hired investigators who dug up every detail of Sarah's past financial struggles, her lack of formal education, the questionable legality of her having kept Lily without going through official channels. She painted Sarah as an opportunist who had latched onto a wealthy man to secure her future. Michael wanted to fight back, to use his own resources to destroy Victoria's credibility, but Gerald advised caution. The more this becomes a battle of money and power, the worse we look, he explained. We need to focus on what matters: Lily's emotional well-being, the bond she has with Emma, the stability of her current situation. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Michael wore his most conservative suit, and Sarah dressed carefully in a simple navy dress. They left the girls with Dennis, who had become a trusted presence in their lives. The courtroom was smaller than Michael expected, less formal. Judge Patricia Morrison was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened carefully as both sides presented their cases. Victoria's attorney painted a picture of a privileged widow trying to assuage his guilt by collecting broken children. He questioned Sarah's fitness as a guardian, her inability to provide proper documentation of Lily's origins, her suspicious timing in connecting with Michael. Gerald countered with emotional testimony, medical records showing Emma's dramatic improvement since Lily entered her life, and character witnesses who spoke to Sarah's dedication and Michael's genuine care for both girls. The judge asked to speak with Lily privately. Michael's heart pounded as he watched the small girl disappear into the judge's chambers. 15 minutes later they emerged, and Michael couldn't read anything from Judge Morrison's expression. "This is a difficult case," the judge began, settling back into her seat. "We have a child who was essentially abandoned, then informally adopted by a woman with no legal standing. We have biological family claiming rights they've ignored for 8 years. And we have a wealthy benefactor whose motivations, while seemingly pure, could be questioned." Michael held his breath. "However," Judge Morrison continued, "my primary concern is always the best interest of the child, and Lily was very clear with me about where she wants to be. She wants to stay with Sarah and Michael and Emma. She considers them her family. She's thriving in their care. And most importantly, she's happy." Victoria started to protest, but the judge held up a hand. "Mrs. Carson, I understand your desire to connect with your granddaughter, but you cannot undo 8 years of absence with legal maneuvers. If you truly care about Lily's well-being, you'll give her time and space to adjust to this new information on her own terms." The judge turned to Michael and Sarah. "I'm granting temporary custody to Mr. Thornton and Miss Bennett jointly, with the adoption proceedings to move forward. Mrs. Carson, you'll be granted supervised visitation rights should Lily choose to exercise them. But the child will remain in her current home." Relief flooded through Michael so powerfully he felt dizzy. Sarah grabbed his hand, squeezing tightly, and he could feel her trembling. Victoria stood abruptly, her face twisted with anger. "This is a travesty. You're choosing money over family." "I'm choosing a child's happiness over an adult's sense of entitlement," Judge Morrison replied calmly. "This hearing is adjourned." As they left the courthouse, Michael felt like he could finally breathe again. But he knew this wasn't over. Victoria Carson was not a woman who accepted defeat easily. And something about the whole situation still felt incomplete, like there were pieces of the puzzle still missing. His instincts were right. That evening, Dennis Walsh came to Michael's study with a file folder and a grim expression. "Sir, there's something you need to see. I've been doing some digging into Catherine's accident, the one that killed her 5 years ago." Michael's stomach clenched. "What about it?" Dennis opened the folder, spreading out photographs and documents. "The official report said she lost control of her car on Pacific Coast Highway, went over the cliff. But I found some inconsistencies. A witness who was never interviewed. Damage to the car that doesn't match the official explanation. And this." He held up a photograph of a handwritten note, yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakably Catherine's. "If something happens to me, look for the truth. Bradley knows what he's capable of." Michael stared at the note, his blood running cold. "Where did you find this?" "Hidden in a box of Catherine's things in the storage unit. Things that were never properly inventoried after her death." "What are you saying, Dennis?" The older man met his eyes steadily. "I'm saying I don't think Catherine's death was an accident. And I think Bradley Carson knows more about it than he's told anyone." The room seemed to spin. Michael gripped the edge of his desk, trying to process this new information. If Bradley had been involved in Catherine's death, if it hadn't been an accident, then everything changed. The custody battle, the adoption, Lily's future, it all became infinitely more complicated. "What do we do?" Michael asked quietly. "We investigate," Dennis said. "Carefully, thoroughly, and we find the truth, whatever it is. Because that little girl upstairs deserves to know where she really comes from and what really happened to her mother." Michael nodded slowly, his mind already racing ahead to all the implications. The path forward had just become much darker and more dangerous than he'd anticipated. But there was no turning back now. Too much was at stake. Too many lives hung in the balance, and somewhere in the shadows of the past, the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The investigation into Catherine's death consumed the following weeks. Dennis worked quietly, methodically, interviewing witnesses who had never been contacted by the police, examining accident reports, and tracing Catherine's movements in the days before she died. What emerged was a picture Michael had never wanted to see. Catherine had been planning to leave him. Not for Bradley, as he initially assumed, but to escape from Bradley. In the months before her death, she had made appointments with divorce attorneys, transferred money into a private account, and confided in her therapist about feeling trapped and afraid. The therapist, Dr. Helen Chang, agreed to speak with Dennis under strict confidentiality. Her notes painted a disturbing portrait. Catherine had become terrified of Bradley, believing he was obsessed with her and with Lily. When she made the decision to give the baby up for adoption, Bradley had threatened her. Not with violence, but with exposure. He would tell Michael everything. He would destroy her marriage, her reputation, her relationship with Emma. Catherine had felt she had no choice. She gave Lily to Sarah, who had recently been fired and was struggling financially, hoping that the baby would have a better life away from the toxic web of secrets and manipulation. But Bradley hadn't let it go. He had continued to pursue Catherine, to pressure her, to demand that they be together. The night of the accident, Catherine had been driving to meet someone. Phone records showed she had called the police station 20 minutes before the crash, though no record existed of what she reported. And the witness Dennis found, a retired teacher named Margaret Cole, remembered seeing Catherine's car that night, pulled over on the shoulder of Pacific Coast Highway. Another car had been parked behind it, a black sedan. She had seen two people arguing beside the vehicles, a woman and a man, their gestures animated and hostile. Margaret hadn't thought much of it at the time. Couples argued, but she had noticed when the woman got back in her car and drove off quickly, the black sedan following. 10 minutes later, she heard the sirens and saw the emergency vehicles heading toward the cliff where Catherine's car had gone over. Dennis took all of this to Michael one quiet evening, laying out the evidence piece by piece. "I can't prove Bradley forced her off the road," he said carefully, "but I can prove he was there. I can prove she was afraid of him. Can't I can prove the police investigation was incomplete?" Michael sat in silence, absorbing it all. The woman he had loved, the mother of his child, had been living in terror, and he had been too busy, too trusting, too blind to see it. "What do we do with this?" Michael asked finally, his voice heavy. "We take it to the district attorney. Let them decide if there's enough for a reopened investigation. At minimum, Bradley will have to answer questions. At maximum, he could face charges for harassment, intimidation, possibly more." Michael thought about Lily sleeping upstairs in her room full of toys and books and love. She deserved to know the truth about her mother, but she also deserved to be protected from the darkness of adult sins. "Do it," Michael said, "but carefully. I don't want Lily hurt by this." "Understood." The following week, the district attorney's office announced they were reopening the investigation into Catherine Thornton's death. Bradley Carson was named as a person of interest. Victoria, furious and defensive, immediately withdrew her custody petition, focusing all her energy on protecting her son. The media attention was intense but brief. Michael's attorneys managed to keep most of the details private, protecting the children from the worst of it. Bradley, facing mounting legal pressure and the weight of his own guilt, agreed to cooperate fully with investigators. In exchange for his testimony and permanent relinquishment of all parental rights to Lily, the DA agreed not to pursue criminal charges. The truth that emerged was complicated and sad. Bradley hadn't forced Catherine off the road, but he had been following her, trying to convince her to leave Michael and be with him. In her panic and desperation to get away from him, Catherine had been driving too fast, not paying attention to the curves. The accident had been just that, an accident, but one caused by Bradley's relentless pursuit and Catherine's fear. Bradley gave a deposition that was heartbreaking in its honesty. He had loved Catherine obsessively, destructively. He had convinced himself that they were meant to be together, that Michael was the obstacle standing in the way of their happiness. He had manipulated, pressured, and ultimately driven Catherine to her death, even if his hands never touched the wheel. "I killed her," he said in his statement, his voice breaking. "Maybe not legally, but morally. So I killed her as surely as if I'd pushed her car over that cliff myself. And I have to live with that. I don't deserve forgiveness." "I don't deserve Lily. I don't deserve anything." When Michael read the deposition, he felt an unexpected emotion, pity. Bradley had destroyed his own life along with Catherine's. He had lost everything. His friend, his reputation, his daughter, his future. He was a broken man, and no punishment the courts could deliver would be worse than the one he had already inflicted on himself. Michael called Bradley one final time. "I don't forgive you," he said. "I probably never will. But I don't hate you anymore either. You're just a sad man who made terrible choices. And the best thing you can do now is stay away and let Lily have the life she deserves." "I know," Bradley whispered. Tell her I'm sorry. When she's old enough to understand, tell her I'm sorry." Michael hung up without promising anything. Some apologies were too late, too insufficient. With Bradley's parental rights terminated and Victoria no longer fighting them, the adoption proceedings moved forward smoothly. 6 months after that first day in the park, Michael and Sarah stood in family court with both girls beside them, listening as Judge Morrison made it official. By the power vested in me by the state of California, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Lily Bennett is now legally Lily Thornton, daughter of Michael Thornton, with all the rights and privileges thereof. Emma squealed and threw her arms around Lily. The two sisters hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes and Michael felt his own vision blur. After the ceremony, as they walked out of the courthouse into the bright California sunshine, Emma looked up at Sarah. "Does this mean you're my mom now too?" Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. "I could never replace your mother, sweetheart. But if you want me to be part of your family, I would be honored." "I want that," Emma said seriously. "I want us to be a real family. All of us." Michael looked at Sarah and something shifted between them. Over the past months, their relationship had deepened, evolved from necessity to genuine affection. They had learned each other's rhythms, supported each other through crisis, built something real in the ruins of their separate tragedies. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Michael found Sarah on the terrace, where they had stood months ago when he first asked her to stay. The ocean stretched out before them, endless and eternal. "Sarah," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him, her expression open and warm. "What is it?" "When Catherine died, I thought I would never feel anything again. I thought the best I could hope for was to survive, to get through each day without falling apart. But you changed that. You and Lily. You brought life back into this house, into Emma, into me. And I realized something. I'm in love with you." Sarah's breath caught. "Michael, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, I needed you to know how I feel." "I love you too," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I've been falling in love with you for months, but I was afraid. Afraid it was too soon, too complicated, too much." "It is too soon," Michael agreed. "And it is complicated. But it's also real, and I'm tired of being afraid of real things." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Sarah's eyes widened. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, but I'm asking you to think about a future with me. A real future, as a family. All four of us." Inside the box was a simple, elegant ring, a single diamond on a platinum band. Sarah looked at it, then at Michael, and then she smiled. It was the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. "Yes," she said, "I'll think about it. But Michael, I'm pretty sure I already know the answer." He kissed her then, soft and gentle, a promise of new beginnings. Behind them, through the window, they could hear the girls laughing about something, their voices carrying through the house that was finally, truly a home. The wedding took place 3 months later in the garden, where Emma and Lily had played that first day. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family. Emma and Lily were flower girls, wearing matching white dresses and carrying baskets of roses. Dennis Walsh stood as Michael's best man, and Sarah's sister flew in from Oregon to be her maid of honor. Judge Morrison, who had become something of a friend through the whole ordeal, officiated. As Michael and Sarah exchanged vows under an arch of flowers, with the ocean as their backdrop and their daughters as witnesses, it felt like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Michael looked at Sarah, this strong, beautiful woman who had saved his family in so many ways, and he felt gratitude so profound it was almost painful. He had been broken, shattered into pieces he thought could never be reassembled. But here he was, whole again, different than before, marked by loss and struggle, but whole. When Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Emma and Lily cheered so loudly that several of the guests laughed. The girls ran to their parents, and the four of them embraced, a tangle of arms and love and joy. At the reception, as Michael danced with Sarah under the stars, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "Can you believe this is our life now?" she whispered. "A year ago, Lily and I were struggling to survive. And up to soon, now we're a family," Michael finished. "A real family. Do you think Catherine would be okay with this?" Sarah asked quietly. "With us?" Michael considered the question. I think Catherine would want Emma to be happy, and Lily to be safe. And if we can give them that, then yes, I think she would be okay with it. More than okay. They swayed together, and Michael thought about all the improbable coincidences that had led them here. A chance encounter in a park, a lonely girl asking to play, a voice breaking through silence. If any one thing had been different, they might never have found each other. But they had. And from tragedy and secrets and pain, they had built something beautiful. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Michael gathered his new family around him. Sarah with her warm smile and steady presence. Emma no longer silent, her voice bright and clear. And Lily, the little girl who had started it all with a simple question. "I want to tell you all something," Michael said. "This year has been the hardest and most wonderful of my life. We've faced challenges I never imagined. We've uncovered truths that were painful. But through it all, we've had each other, and that's made all the difference. We're stronger together," Emma said wisely, and Michael marveled at how much she had grown. "We're a team," Lily added, grabbing her sister's hand. "We're a family," Sarah said, looking at each of them in turn, "and nothing will ever change that." They stood together on the terrace, looking out at the ocean, four people who had been broken by life and somehow found each other. The waves crashed against the cliffs, eternal and unchanging, and above them, the stars began to appear one by one, lighting up the darkening sky. Michael thought about the journey they had traveled, from that morning in the park to this moment. It hadn't been easy. There had been tears and fights and moments of despair, but there had also been laughter and growth and love, so much love, and he realized something profound. Life didn't always give you what you planned for. Sometimes it took away the things you thought you couldn't live without. But if you remained open, if you let yourself heal and hope and try again, it could also give you gifts beyond imagination. His gift was this family. This beautiful, imperfect, miraculous family. As they headed inside, the girls running ahead to change out of their fancy clothes, Sarah paused and looked back at the ocean. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Michael asked. "For taking a chance on us. For being brave enough to let us in." "I should be thanking you," Michael replied. "You gave me back my daughter. You gave me back my life." "We gave those things to each other," Sarah said, taking his hand. "That's how families work." They walked inside together, closing the door on the past and stepping fully into their future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, because they had learned the most important lesson life had to teach. That love, real love, wasn't about perfection or fairy tales. It was about showing up even when it was hard, about choosing each other day after day, about building something strong from broken pieces, about forgiveness and second chances and the courage to begin again. And as Michael tucked Emma and Lily into their beds that night, listening to them giggle and whisper about the wedding, he knew with absolute certainty that they were going to be okay. More than okay. They were going to thrive, because they had each other. And in the end, that was everything that mattered. Years later, when people asked Michael about how his family came together, he would tell them about a morning in a park, about a brave little girl who asked a simple question, about a voice breaking through silence, about love found in the ruins of loss. And he would always end the story the same way. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. You just have to be willing to see them.